The man from Medellin, Hernán Cortés, was born in 1485 in the dusty, provincial town of Medellin, Spain, into a family of minor nobility. His parents sent him to study law, but the restless and ambitious young Cortés was bored by dusty books. He was drawn to the thrilling tales coming from the New World, a land of gold, glory, and adventure that had been discovered just a few years before his birth. He abandoned his studies and at the age of 19, sailed for the Caribbean, seeking his fortune. In the rough, frontier society of the Spanish colonies, Cortés proved to be a man of immense charm, intelligence, and utter ruthlessness. He participated in the brutal conquest of Cuba, earning a reputation as a capable soldier and an even more capable administrator. He became a wealthy landowner and a man of local importance, but he was consumed by a desire for something greater. His great opportunity came in 1818. The governor of Cuba, wary of Cortés's ambition but recognizing his talent, appointed him to lead an expedition to the mainland, to what is now Mexico. The mission was strictly for exploration and trade. But Cortés had other ideas. He poured his own fortune and went deep into debt to assemble a much larger and more heavily armed force than his orders allowed. The governor, now deeply suspicious, tried to revoke his commission, but it was too late. In a brazen act of defiance, Cortés set sail in February 1519, effectively launching an unauthorized, illegal invasion. He was now a mutineer, gambling everything on the prospect of finding a prize so vast that his insubordination would be forgiven. The first encounter, Cortés landed on the coast of the Yucatan Peninsula with a tiny force, around 500 soldiers, 13 horses, a few small cannons, and a pack of war dogs. It was a minuscule army to face an unknown continent, but he possessed several crucial advantages. His steel swords, crossbows, and firearms were terrifyingly superior to the obsidian-edged clubs and cotton armor of the native warriors. Even more shocking were the horses and war dogs, creatures the people of the Americas had never seen before. To many, the sight of a man on horseback seemed like a single, monstrous, godlike being. Cortés's most important asset, however, was not a weapon, but a person. Among the first natives he encountered, he was given a group of slave girls. One of them was a young Nahua woman who had been sold into slavery and had learned the Mayan language. She was known as La Malinche, or Dona Marina to the Spanish. She was brilliant, and she quickly learned Spanish. She became Cortés's translator, his advisor on local customs, his political strategist, and his mistress. Through her, Cortés was able to understand and exploit the complex political landscape of the land he had just entered. She was the key that would unlock the Aztec Empire. From the coastal peoples, Cortés began to hear tales of a fabulously wealthy and powerful empire that dominated the interior. The Aztec Empire, ruled by a great emperor from a magnificent city built on a lake in the high Central Valley. He learned that the Aztecs were not loved. They were feared and hated conquerors who demanded a heavy tribute of goods and, more horrifyingly, of human beings for sacrifice from the peoples they had subdued. The march to Tenochtitlan Cortés made a decision of breathtaking audacity. He would not just explore. He would march inland and confront this great empire. To ensure there was no turning back, he gave a dramatic order. He had his own ships scuttled, deliberately stranding his army in a hostile land. The die is cast, he told his men. Their only options now were to conquer or to die. His strategy was a masterstroke of diplomacy and terror. As he marched inland, he encountered the Tlaxcalans, a powerful and fiercely independent people who were the sworn bitter enemies of the Aztecs. After a series of brutal battles in which the Spanish nearly met their match, Cortés did not crush the Tlaxcalans. He made them his allies. He promised them vengeance against their hated Aztec overlords. The Tlaxcalan warriors, thousands of them, would become the indispensable backbone of his army. To those who resisted, he showed merciless cruelty. At the city of Cholula, Suspecting an ambush, he lured the city's nobles into a courtyard and had them systematically massacred. A terrifying act of preemptive terror that sent a shockwave through the empire. Meanwhile, in the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan, the Emperor Montezuma II was paralyzed by indecision and religious dread. Aztec mythology foretold the return of the great feathered serpent god, Quetzalcoatl, from the east in that very year. He did not know if these strange, pale-skinned, bearded men were gods or invaders. He sent lavish gifts of gold and feathers to courts, begging him to turn back. But the sight of so much gold only inflamed the Spaniards' greed and strengthened their resolve to reach the capital, the City of Dreams, in November 1519. Cortés and his small army, now bolstered by thousands of Tlaxcalan warriors, finally crested the high mountain pass and looked down upon the Valley of Mexico. The sight that met their eyes was something out of a dream. In the center of a vast shimmering lake lay the city of Tenochtitlan, a metropolis of whitewashed pyramids, temples, and palaces, connected to the shore by a series of long, straight causeways. It was larger and more magnificent than any city the Spaniards had ever seen. The Spanish soldier Bernal Diaz del Castillo, who was with Cortés, later wrote, "We were amazed and said that it was like the enchantments they tell of in the legend of Amadis, on account of the great towers and quays and buildings rising from the water. Some of our soldiers even asked whether the things that we saw were not a dream." Montezuma, still unsure how to react, had made a fateful decision. Instead of ambushing the Spaniards on the causeways, he welcomed them into his capital as honored guests. He led Cortés into the heart of the city, housed him in a magnificent palace, and lavished him with yet more gold. The conquistadors were now inside the very center of Aztec power, walking through a city of hundreds of thousands of people, a beautiful but terrifying world where the priests' hair was matted with the blood of human sacrifices, the hostage king and the night of sorrows. Spaniards were not guests. They were in a gilded cage. Cortés knew his position was incredibly precarious. In another move of astonishing audacity, he marched to Montezuma's palace and, under a polite pretext, took the emperor himself hostage. He brought Montezuma back to the Spanish quarters and began to rule the empire through his captive king. This fragile situation was shattered when Cortés was forced to leave the city to deal with a rival Spanish force that had been sent from Cuba to arrest him. In his absence, his hot-headed subordinate, Pedro de Alvarado, panicked during a religious festival and ordered the massacre of hundreds of unarmed Aztec nobles in the Great Temple. The city exploded in a furious uprising. When Cortés returned, he found his garrison under siege. He forced Montezuma to appear on a balcony to try and calm his people, but they were no longer listening to their captive king. He was pelted with stones and arrows and died shortly after, either from his wounds or murdered by the Spanish. With their puppet king dead, the Spaniards' position was untenable. On the night of June 30th, 1520, they attempted a desperate escape. Weighed down with stolen gold, they tried to sneak out of the city under the cover of darkness, but they were discovered. The Aztec warriors swarmed them on the causeways. The retreat turned into a bloody rout. Hundreds of Spaniards and thousands of their Tlaxcalan allies were killed, cut down in battle, or dragged away to be sacrificed to the Aztec war god. Many more, weighed down by their loot, fell off the causeways and drowned. It was a catastrophic defeat. Cortés, who managed to escape, reportedly sat beneath a tree and wept. The Spanish would remember it forever as La Noche Triste, the night of sorrows. The siege of Tenochtitlan, a lesser man would have given up. But Cortés was possessed of an iron will. He retreated to the safety of Tlaxcala, his alliance now more crucial than ever. There, he began to methodically prepare for the final conquest. He understood that a direct assault on the island city was impossible. He would have to besiege it, and to do that, he would need a navy. In one of the most remarkable logistical feats of the age, He had his men build a fleet of 13 small, prefabricated warships or brigantines. These were then dismantled, carried piece by piece over the high mountains by thousands of native porters, and reassembled on the shores of Lake Texcoco. But an even more devastating and unintentional weapon was now at work. A Spanish soldier had unknowingly brought smallpox to the mainland. The disease, to which the native population had no immunity, swept through Tenochtitlan with terrifying speed, killing tens of thousands of people, including the new emperor, and leaving the city grievously weakened before the final siege even began. In the spring of 1521, Cortés launched his final assault. His new fleet, armed with cannons, gave him control of the lake. His forces, now numbering over 100,000 with the full might of his native allies, blockaded the causeways, cutting off all food and fresh water to the city. What followed was a brutal, merciless 93-day siege. The Aztecs, led by their heroic last Emperor Cuauhtémoc, fought with incredible courage, street by street, house by house. But against cannons, steel, and starvation, their cause was hopeless. The fall of an empire, August 13, 1521, the last pockets of Aztec resistance were extinguished. The magnificent city of Tenochtitlan, which had so amazed the Spaniards just 2 years earlier, was a smoking, corpse-filled ruin. Cuauhtémoc was captured and later tortured and executed by Cortés. The Aztec Empire, a civilization that had flourished for centuries, had been completely and utterly destroyed. Cortés, the mutineer, was now the master of Mexico. His incredible victory and the vast treasures he had secured ensured that his past insubordination was forgiven. The King of Spain named him governor and captain general of the new territory, which was christened New Spain. On the ruins of the old Aztec capital, Cortés began to build a new city, Mexico City, the future capital of a vast Spanish colonial empire. The price of conquest. Cortés lived out his life as one of the wealthiest and most famous men of his age. But his later years were a long anticlimax. He was soon sidelined by the professional bureaucrats the Spanish crown sent to govern the new colony. He returned to Spain to plead his case before the king, but was met with a cool reception. He died in Spain in 1547, a wealthy but increasingly bitter man. The conquest of Mexico was a pivotal and cataclysmic event in world history. It was the moment that the Spanish Empire truly began its expansion in the Americas, and it set the template for the conquests that would follow. It was a collision of two worlds that resulted in the complete destruction of one and the vast enrichment of the other, the conquistadors. Legacy. Hernán Cortés remains a deeply controversial figure. To some, he is a hero, a man of incredible courage, leadership, and strategic genius who brought Christianity to a pagan land and opened up a new world. To others, he is a villain, a greedy, duplicitous, and genocidal monster whose unprovoked invasion led to the deaths of millions of people and the destruction of a great civilization. He was, in reality, a complex product of his time and age, of intense religious faith, brutal warfare, and a rapacious greed for gold and glory. He was a man of immense personal bravery and even greater cruelty. His conquest, achieved against impossible odds, stands as one of the most audacious and consequential military campaigns in all of history, a brutal and transformative event that forever altered the destiny of the Americas and the world.